We all go? Right, good evening, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Audit and Governance Committee. I'm Councillor Barry Pierpoint, the Chairman of the committee, and my Vice Chairman, Councillor Anton Dunning, is to my right. Our housekeeping rules are as follows. Restroom facilities are available for ladies on this floor, and halfway down the main stairwell for the gentlemen. In the event of a fire sounding, officers will escort everyone out of the building to the nearest fire safety point in the car park. Would all persons addressing the meeting please do so through the microphone system? At all times, this meeting is being recorded. Please be advised that abuse or intimidation of any kind will not be tolerated. Anyone who is deemed to breach these requirements will be warned and asked to refrain. If the behaviour persists, they will be asked to leave the meeting. We will now move to part one of the agenda. Are there any apologies, Amanda?
Apologies from Councillor Marston, Chairman.
Thank you. Just for the information, Councillor Marston's joined this committee, A&G, and the other councillor,
Councillor A.
Arabama, has moved off the committee, so that's just for the information. Do any members wish to declare any interest in respect of any items on the agenda? Councillor Gleeson.
Yeah, Chair, I am appointed by the council to the board of PSPL.
Thank you. Everybody quite clear what that is? You don't want any? That's okay. That's very kind of you. Thank you very much.
Councillor.
Very kind of you to bring that to our attention. Thank you very much. Right. Do I have the committee's permission to sign the minutes of the last meeting held on the 29th of January 2024?
Agreed.
All in favour? Lovely. That's kind of you. I'll put that on there. There you are. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions at all from the public at all, Amanda?
None, Chairman.
Right, that concludes the preliminaries. We'll now move to part two of the agenda items. And the item one on the agenda this evening is the internal audit progress report, which starts on page 7 of the agenda pack. I'm going to ask our internal auditor, Matthew Waller, to talk us through that report.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. Evening, everybody. So it starts on page 7, our regular internal audit report to you. What these progress reports do is just detail all the work that we've done since we last reported to you. So it captures every bit of work that we've done, and we include an update. And page 10 of the pack just gives you the purpose of the report. So a status on the work we're doing, how we're progressing against delivering the annual plan, and any issues or significant issues that may well impact on my annual opinion, and that I just want to bring to the committee's attention. So page 11 is just the performance dashboard, but just to give an update since I pulled this together, all the work is currently underway and nearing completion. I think we're in a better position now as we get to year end than we've ever been before. So in terms of delivering the audit plan, that's going really well, and we're just looking to finalise the last few audits by the end of March. And then page 12 is the update on internal audit activity. So this is quite a key page in the report. So as it says, since we last reported to you, there's been 1 no assurance, 1 limited assurance, and 5 other pieces of work, including 3 substantial audits. I think with the chair's agreement, we're just going to focus on not on the P card and the payroll yet. We're going to look at that after going through the main body of the progress report. We also follow up on management actions, because that's a very good indicator as well of how audits are being acted to and how management are implementing recommendations that we make. So you'll see there's only 1 high outstanding action and 7 medium actions. And the details of those are listed further down in the report. We did get a response from all officers against those actions, which was really good. So all of those have got an updated comment against them. And to only have 1 high, although you might want them all done, I think that's still quite a good position to be, and we've had an update on that. So then page 13 just gives a really clear view of all the work we've delivered since we last reported to you. So you can see there the strategic risk review we've done, the building control and housing benefit follow-up all got a substantial level of assurance, which is the highest level of assurance that we give. I think housing benefits is particularly a good area because previously that's had some limited assurances around Boston's housing benefits. That now sits with PSPS and the assurance on that and the controls on that have improved. We've also done some work on developing a fraud risk register with council colleagues. So that we've looked at some specific areas and that's detailed later on in the report. And I think council colleagues are now going to make that part of their regular risk management reporting. And I think you'll see more of that coming to future audit committees. So as well as strategic risks, there'll be some regular work on fraud risks as well, which will strengthen that process. We then go into page 14, goes into the executive summaries of all the limited or no assurance reports. And I know we're going to focus on those in a minute, but that summary is there for members to have an easy overview of the work that we've done. We've also attached the full reports later on in this progress report, so members can see the whole reports. And then just further down, Chair, on page 22 lists the annual plan and where we are with delivering that. And then you've got Appendix 1 and Appendix 2, which is the details of the outstanding actions. So I think at that point I'll stop, and if that's right with you, Chair, I'll take any questions people have got just generally on the progress report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matthew. That's very kind of you. We will take questions from the committee, but not on the P cards and not on the payroll. They will be done separately. So any questions on that general report that Matthew gave you just then? Or any questions? Yes, Jones.
Update to the outstanding actions. I think it would be helpful though, given there's a lot of dates.
Any response at all to that?
Sorry, Chair. Yeah, just happy to take that into account. We do try and get new dates, so we'll just pursue that for the next time we do a progress report and try and capture those new dates when actions should be implemented by.
That's kind of you. Thank you very much. I do appreciate it. Are there any more questions on that general report from Matthew? Yes, carry on.
There you go.
Green light. Okay.
Apologies, how awful not to be able to hear me. I think it was a deliberate ploy. It was just on the housing benefit. Great to have substantial assurance, as with the others. But there was a residual issue, I think, with a manual quality assurance process in Boston Borough Council. Are we able to address that and come into line with the other two councils?
Chair, if I can, yes. So at the moment, we still have a manual process in place, which obviously has delivered the necessary improvements for this year. We need to align Boston Borough Council's revenues and benefits systems to the one that we use for both East Lindsey and South Holland. And we will be proposing as part of our transformation plan that comes forward to all three councils later this year that Boston's system alignment is undertaken as a priority, and that will address that gap. If we don't achieve that, then we can still carry on with the manual process, but it's not as streamlined and as efficient as it is for the other two.
Can I ask a question, Lewis? When do you expect the transformation to be completed by? Because it's all right listening to all these things, but I like dates. I like to know we're being stuck to dates and we can then hold people to account?
Yes, Chair. So to some extent, we are discussing the timetable and the process that the councils want to adopt to take the transformation plan through. Ultimately, it will span our next 3-year business plan. So that's what we're developing as we speak to bring forward from this year to the councils. And even if the councils agree that transformation programme, there is then a fairly sizable piece of work to do to bring that system alignment in. So as I sit here today, if we were achieving that within 12 months of a decision being made to support that, that would be quite significant progress. But I would equally reassure you that the manual process that we've put in, although a little bit more resource intensive for us, has still assured us, and we've got to a position from where for the last 2 years there's been a limited assurance, I believe, and we've got to a place of that there's substantial assurance around the process that we put in place.
Thank you for that. Into anybody else? Councillor Cantwell.
Just a quick one from me. On page 22, on the assurance work 23-24, it mentions ICT high risks review. And I recognise there's been a number of reports and information produced on it, but it says NA on the final report. I see that it's also mentioned in the internal audit plan on agenda item 2. Is that because it's going to be done next year, or is there a reason the final report hasn't been done for this one?
No, thank you for noticing. No, that has all gone through as normal. That should just be a tick in that box, not an NA. So
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any more questions at all from anybody? Right, we'll go on to the next item then, Matthew, is the P cards.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So starting on page 29 of the progress report, and then following through, you've got the full internal audit report that we've done on the P card work. And following that, you've got the payroll reconciliation follow-up that we did. So I think the reports clearly set out what we found for P cards. So we've put in there the scope and the context of what we've looked at, that the audits have an action plan against them so that members can clearly see what we've identified and what we've agreed with management in terms of looking at those gaps in controls and assurance and agreeing management actions, responsible officers and dates to do that. Chair, did you want to sort of do P cards first and then look at payroll? Yeah, so
I don't
we
want
stick to P cards.
I don't want to get the two topics mixed up. Let's stick with the P cards first. Let's get through all that one, and then we'll come back to the payroll afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this was obviously a no assurance report, and in our executive summary on page 34, we just set out the process that we looked at. This was brought on by management identifying an incident at one of the other councils that then led to them coming to us to look at how we might investigate that incident and then also do an audit to provide some assurance around the P card process, and especially where there may be gaps in that, and focusing on what that is and giving our independent report. So the following pages are all the work that we did, and as I say, the action plans. And I think I'll just throw it open to questions, Chair.
Right, I'll start the ball rolling first of all. What I have to say to everybody is, first of all, I've invited officers to this meeting on the basis that I felt the report is very severe. I wasn't very happy about it, and if I was the chief executive of this authority, I would be very disgruntled, very angry, and I would take it very personally that I'm reading a report like this with all those issues in it. Nobody can identify how long these issues have been going on for, and in my view, it's not acceptable. However, the reason for inviting everybody here this evening is that we're going to learn some lessons from this, because obviously lots of questions have been asked, and I did send to Christine Marshall details of all the questions that some of the committee wanted to ask, and in return she sent us back all the answers. Some of those questions and answers we've got questions off the back of the answers as well. I'm going to go through those in a minute. But before I do that, I want to talk to and ask each officer that's in the room tonight whether they have P cards, and I want to know how many P cards are under their control. So I'm going to start with the gentleman in the far corner. I don't know your name, sir. You with the glasses on, yes.
Growth and development, thank you.
You can come near the microphone so we can hear you. Do you have any P cards under your control?
I have 2 P cards under my control, Chair.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the staff that is responsible for that, are they understanding how to use those P cards?
I believe they are, sir, yes.
You believe, or that you know they do?
I know they do, yes.
That's good. And what checks and balances are you putting in place on a regular basis to make sure those cards are being used properly and correctly?
Whenever a member of my team uses their P card, I ask them to notify me that they've done so, so that I've got a record of them using the card. And then obviously got the app, which has been introduced, that gives me citing of the receipts that relate to the transaction, and also the statements associated with that as well. So I see quite visibly when those cards are being used, Chair.
Okay.
Does that help?
And can I have your assurance then that all the necessary checks and balances are in place to make sure that nothing is not done that's not come in with to be compliable with all the policies and procedures of this council regarding all the expenditure on those cards?
I'm happy to give that assurance, Chair.
Thank you very much, sir. If you'd like to take a seat, next one is Mr. Phil Perry. Phil, can I ask you some questions again? Have you got any P cards?
In the team, we have one, yes.
Just one?
One now, yeah.
And have you got this under control regarding all the checks and balances?
Yeah, the training has been undertaken. All staff are completed their training, and they reported to their line managers on their spend.
And you're happy that everything is done as per what we want them to do in conjunction with all the procedures and policies of using P cards, yes?
Yes.
Thank you. John, I can ask you the same question. Have you got any P cards in your control?
I had 3, Chair.
3.
I no longer have 3. Those have been cancelled. Within the Communities Directorate, I can inform you there are 27 active P cards. There are 16 in Wellbeing and Community Leadership. 1, as Phil has said, in Leisure and Cultural Services. 5 in Neighbourhood Services, and 5 in Regulatory Services. But under my direct control, there are currently none, Chair.
Okay. Those you just mentioned, all those cards there, who's managing that that process of making sure that they are being checked, that they are being used properly, and they're being used in line with all the policies and procedures of the council for ensuring there's no issues that's going to arise out of misuse? Thank
you, Chair. You've been very clear. The authorising managers are Phil Perry to my right,
okay,
Emily Spicer to my left, and Christian Allen to Emily's left. All present tonight, Chair.
Okay. Do I need to ask those officers the same question, or are we happy with what John said on your behalf? Yes?
They're at liberty to speak for themselves, Chair.
Let them speak. That's what they're here for.
Thank you, Chair. I'm content with the information that John has given, and I'm also happy to confirm that all my officers that have P cards have attended the training, as have I myself, and we understand the necessary checks and balances that are needed to ensure that we're all compliant as per the policy.
Thank you very much. Christian?
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I'm 5 P cards in my area in Boston. And again, my members of staff have attended the training, as have I as an approver, and I'm content that they're following the policy that's now in place.
And just ask Andy at all, have you got any comment, Andy, on P cards? You got any in your control?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've got 3 in my area. Like colleagues, all of my staff have attended the requisite training. Everybody has downloaded the app on both their work phone and have access online through the Lloyds account. I've got the authorising application on my phone, so there's a clear audit trail that follows the management response that you've had in relation to the control regulation of procurement cards. And just to add to what my colleagues have said, there's also a very clear escalation process and policy that's stimulated through the applications that we've now, across the organisations have been implemented, and effective and robust management actions in the event that anybody with a procurement card isn't compliant with the rules that have been set.
I really take that as a yes. Thank you very much, Phil. James, any cards under your control?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there's 3 cards in my directorate at Boston. None of those report into me directly. They all go into group managers. So Suzanne, for example, will have a couple of cards into her, and Sean, the communications group manager, will have one that goes into him. All my workforce have been through the training. I've been through the training as well. Should any issues be escalated to me, and my group managers have had the training too.
Thank you for that. Does anybody else want to say anything at all on P cards at the offices, first of all? Anybody want to add anything to what we've already heard? Right, let me just finish off what I'm going to say, then we'll go on to general questions with the P cards. Just going to clarify that in any situation in a business organisation, there should be no excuses when dealing with cash, stock and expenditure. Everyone in a position of authority must have strict controls, checks and adhere to procedures and be accountable. This is very important, and making sure that everything that's purchased has a receipt. Treat this situation as if it's your own business and your money, in my view, and you would want these checks and balances to be in place. In my life, as a CEO in various organisations, I've always applied very strict controls where there's expenditure, authority limits and levels, and people just going out purchasing. Everything's been very strict, very controlled. And that's where I've worked all my life, and I'm sure most people have in a general sort of commercial business. I've always applied in my working life 4 principles: professionalism, pride, passion and perfection. And those 4 things have got me where I was throughout my career. And if you strive for all those at 100%, you'll maintain those very high standards that I think we as a committee and assurance we're looking for will be received. I'd like to thank the officers for coming tonight. We haven't finished yet with you because there's going to be some more questions flying around in a minute. But I think it's important that all of us have learnt lessons by the time we finish talking tonight on the P cards, because I think, as I said to you at the beginning, this is a very severe matter. And I know we've got a conclusion because I know James and Christine and Suzanne have sent us a conclusion, but we'll have that at the end of the meeting when we finish all the questions. I want to go on to questions from the reply that you sent back, Christine, if you'd like just to go through this with me. You talk about Lloyds Bank being the supplier and issuing the cards. What's the approval process? Who gives the authority to just hand these cards out willy-nilly?
So in terms of how that happens, if a service decides it wants to have access for a P card, that goes through a service authorisation process. Once that service have considered it, it comes to myself to sign off either the new card or a change to a limit. It could be a temporary increase to a limit. Say, for example, somebody needs to do a lot of sign-offs for vehicles to put their tax through. For example, we might lift it for a month and then take it back down again. So those all proceed through that system. We did a full review very recently and will continue to do regular reviews.
Thank you. The next question I've got for you is about the statements. I read in the report that statements come in and then just automatically paid by Lloyds Bank, or somebody pays them to Lloyds Bank. What my question is, who's checking those statements to make sure they're happy with what's on there, the amount of money that's been issued and spent on each card, who's signing it off, and who's checking and questioning anybody where they think there's some issues and problems? What checks are in place at that point?
So this would be how the app works. So my understanding is as the person makes a payment, literally at that point in time, they take a photo of the receipt and then it goes through to their authorising manager. That reconciles exactly to the statement. There should be no discrepancies. So if there's any issues to pick up in terms of perhaps bad procurement, they need to move to a purchase order, for example, that can be picked up pretty immediately rather than the old manual system, which had a lot of delay built into it potentially. So remember, these are procurement cards. They're for procuring things rather for services rather than credit cards per se. Might be something somebody might compare them to.
Well, reading the report, it sounds like it's been a free-for-all for everybody to just do what they like with the cards, because that's why they haven't got receipts and there's all sorts of issues in there. But I hear what you're saying. I fully understand what you're saying. Okay. I'm going to throw the floor up now to questions from the rest of the committee. We'll start off with Councillor Gleeson.
Well, thank you. Just for clarity, the answers we're getting at the moment is under the new system that's been introduced as a result of the audit. And obviously that's what really we do need to be looking at. Obviously we do need to look at the culture. But my feeling on this is that we're actually seeing the result of us not having enough people to do the work we need. What we're actually seeing is we had a manual system and there became a culture whereby it just went by the board. People weren't actually checking for receipts. But I feel that is because we didn't have sufficient resource. We've now moved to a system electronically that actually makes the whole thing much more easier to manage. And it's a good thing that's come out of the audit result. But I am worried that you can establish a culture within an organisation where people are having to do it as best they can because we're expecting too much of them. And I do think we need to be looking at that wider level because, when you've got people who are, I'm having emails at 9 o'clock at night from officers from their home. They shouldn't be doing that. We've not got sufficient resource in place, in my view. And we do need to look at wider resourcing or technology, as we've done now, to make sure we have a system that works. But my worry is that we have further in the organisation, we have areas where we are just really making to amend and putting band-aids on things. And I think that is a wider worry in my view.
I take your point there, but I'm going to say that there's no excuse for not doing this job properly when it comes to spending people's money and finance and purchases and receipts. And in my view, that is very important. And the importance on there, whether people have got 3 jobs, 2 jobs, haven't got the time, people have got to find the time to do this thing properly. You just can't have 155 cards or 55 cards in this authority just being used by anybody, and it's just a willy-nilly process. Can't have that. Right, going to Councillor Mountain. You can, but very quickly.
I don't disagree with your first statement. The problem is we have to recognise the reality of the situation and the fact that we need to have resources in place that do meet the need. It is all well and good to say, there's no excuse. Of course, there's no excuse, but there are very good reasons and they need addressing.
I'm going to stop you there, and I think we've got the point there. We'll move on to Councillor Mountain.
Thank you very much, Chair. I've got a couple of questions which I want to look at moving forward. The first is around service authorisation. When we are looking at potential card users, are we looking at an enhanced DBS check done on these members of staff to do some background checks, or is it just issued? And then it's around training as well. So obviously we've all recently done some more training from the sound of it to bring us up to the new model of what we're working to. Is that a yearly refresher of training? And looking backwards, what was the training like previously, and when was the last training done?
So in terms of background checks, that would be a matter for the service to consider. Some staff, because of the people they come into contact with, naturally get background checks a matter of course. So it will depend entirely on the service circumstances as to whether or not it's appropriate. Going on to the training, everyone has been trained. If they were not trained, their cards were frozen or withheld until such time as they were trained. And that is something we will again continue with. In terms of the refresher training, I'll just look to Sam if I can as to what the frequency is that's planned for that.
I'm not certain the timescale for refresher training, but I am aware that obviously when new card holders come on board, they will need to have this training delivered to them as part of signing up to the terms and conditions of holding a P card. But I will go away to the team and double check what the frequency of the refresher training will be.
And you keep a record of all the training on these P cards so that everybody has gone through the same process, everybody.
Yes, every live card holder has the date of when they attended the training next to their name, so the P card team have those records.
We'll go on to Councillor Gilbert.
Yes,
Do you want to
sorry,
come
Chair,
back?
if I can come
Sorry.
back on that one.
Apologies.
Obviously, I appreciate with the DBS checks, it depends on which department that they're doing, but ultimately they're dealing with council finances. Is there no enhanced checks or checks done to protect the council and council finances if they've got these cards in place?
Again, it's for every service to consider what the limits are that are needed for their service area. Some are really modest. So you might only have a limit of £250 with a monthly limit of 100 just for ancillaries, through to services that are more regular purchases of things like rents in advance and things like that. If they're placing homeless parties, for example. So it will depend entirely. Again, coming back to the point I made, some services will naturally have those sorts of checks in place because of the sorts of services they're providing. So we're leaving it in those services' professional opinion as to what checks are required. And again, in terms of, if you're worried about fraud, no system can completely remove the potential for fraud, but the new system means that any potential use outside of approval processes will be quickly picked up on.
Thank you very much.
I hear what you say about fraud. Fraud needs to be minimalised at all times by the constant checks and balances that we talked about earlier on. Right, let's move on to, thank you very much, Councillor Mountain. Let's move on to Councillor Gilbert. Apologies.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. I don't know how relevant they are, but I'll ask them. The first is, do we still have 46 cards at Boston Borough, or has the number been reduced now? Because some people mentioned the fact there's been a reduction. There's 55, so 46 is now the sort of the reduced number, is it? Or is it lower than that? Just out of curiosity as much as anything else.
I think it's come down again.
Yeah.
So I need to check what the latest figure is, and I can let the committee know what that latest figure.
That would be helpful, just out of curiosity as much as anything else. The other thing is all the card holders and the card authorising managers, there's a broad spread of different responsibilities across the borough council. I just wonder whether or not there are sort of scoping the use of the card as part of the training process, and whether there's any preferred suppliers that the cards can be used with, or whether that's and there's an element of choice as to which suppliers you go to when you need a particular service dealing with.
If it's a matter like that, it would have it pre-procured, and you won't be using a P card, you'd be using a call-off contract. So again, the aim of the visibility is to ensure we get better procurement in place and make those call-off contracts available. So that would be them raising an order and going through the normal process. So if you like, the review has also identified some areas for further efficiency.
Okay, and in terms of span, I mean, everyone's got the right to use the card for hospitality, for example, if they had the need for it.
The terms and conditions of use are quite defined, so they're quite limited.
Right, okay. And then my final comment really is that I sort of, having worked in the public sector, I sort of myself, I understand the difference between culture and an absence of training. And I have to say that from what I've heard, I do think that this is really an absence of training or refresher training, rather than necessarily a culture which is, in its sense, playing fast and loose with public money. I do think that the fact there's been training laid on has probably dealt with this problem, and it just needs to be continually monitored to ensure we don't see a slip in these standards in the future.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gilbert. The report we're looking at is we're getting some answers so we can understand the issues that we've arrived at today. The end of this meeting of this particular P card, we'll get the final information, the management response, and we'll talk through that. I talked to Joan, our independent member.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, this is about lessons learned and maybe applying them more widely. And first of all, I'd like to say thank you for, there was an update report in the internal audit report from, I think, both BBC and PSPS, which was helpful. So thank you for that. And it does sound as though, yes, we have now got clear process, systems and training in place. But this is about lessons learned. So we do have to look back as well. And I would say that given the degree of non-compliance that's identified in the report, I think it was 2 out of 50 had receipts, 2 out of 50 had been checked by a manager, and the reports subsequent report which does tell us that yes, there was process in place and we did know where responsibility lay within the council, that this perhaps isn't just a training issue. The training can certainly help it, but I have seldom seen in any organisation this degree of non-compliance or management attitude or whatever culture apply only to one individual process. So I think while you don't have, and I see you say you don't have evidence of non-compliance or lack of managerial responsibility being displayed elsewhere, I would say we didn't have evidence here until we looked for it. So I do think this is an opportunity for everyone in the organisation top down just to be a little bit more cautious and tighten your management controls, your management oversight to make sure that this isn't and doesn't become a wider issue. Because if managers aren't doing what managers are supposed to do with P cards, it's entirely possible that not everything is being done with everything else. So I think it is an opportunity to learn from this and just make sure, rather than just say we haven't got evidence of it, so we'll not worry. And if it is a resource issue, which, you know, if we do have so few resources that we aren't able to do our jobs properly, that should be on the risk register, and it should have been on the risk register. And I don't see any risks relating to resourcing leading to non-compliance or potential fraud. Thank you.
Thank you. Christine.
What I would say is if we had evidence of an issue, we would certainly act. And this particular audit, which was self-inflicted, we acted rapidly once we became aware of the extent of the issue. Full reviews were undertaken, backward looking. We looked at new system implementation, training, process, and full review. In terms of governance generally, because you've just widened the scope there, we have a monthly corporate governance SLT. We go through all these types of issues to consider, do we have any areas of concern? Each of the ADs are asked for updates on their particular service areas, and we can explore any concerns or particular issues they may raise. So what I would say to you from a anything being flagged perspective, there's nothing being flagged anywhere else. Also, in terms of the financial controls of the authority, you have a very strong finance team here who regularly and robustly review all your finances.
Chair, could I just add as well to that? There are equally hundreds of transactions that are received, and I think it's fair to say that notwithstanding any of the points that have been made, the sample of transactions, the 50 that were looked at, were actually a sample which already identified they had no supporting evidence. So of that DIP sample, I think it's fair to say, I'm sure Matt can sort of clarify, they've looked at the detail of a number which already you could identify as non-compliant. So of the hundreds of transactions, particularly that both managers and PSPS will be looking at across the authorities, there are equally lots with receipts and those things. I just think that's an important point to be clear on.
That is important context.
I appreciate your answer there, Lewis, and I also appreciate what Christine said. At the end of the day, there's no assurance, and that doesn't satisfy me at the moment until we get to the end of this process, this discussion, as I get the assurance I'm looking for. But I hear what you say. And just to add to that, I did ask Matthew, when was the last internal audit on P cards done? And there isn't one, there hasn't been one. So my question there is, how long has this been going on? And it takes somebody to start defrauding the council before it comes to light, and then we do an investigation. That is not good enough. If the processes and checks and balances have been in place at the time throughout the last few years, including COVID, we wouldn't be in this situation today. I applaud what you've done so far, Christine and her team, and yourself, Lewis, and James and everybody else involved. I applaud it. But looking back over the last 3 or 4 years, we've left ourselves very wide open. And that's where we're coming from at the moment until we can conclude the discussion on the P cards. Anybody else want to make it? Councillor Cantwell.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions from me. Before and after this issue came to light, has our training substantially altered, and have the terms and conditions that P card holders agreed to substantially altered?
I'm not aware that they have substantially altered in any way.
They've certainly improved. I think as has been said, we've put in a whole new process. It's now digital, so it's first of all immediate. So as soon as somebody is spending something on a P card, they've got a notification that they need to upload a receipt. If they don't do that promptly, then the manager is having the escalation process. Whereas before, you would have to wait for a whole months of expenditure before the bank statement arrived, before it was received on paper, before it was sent to the person that had used it. So in that respect, the process has definitely improved, and we've certainly refreshed the training and the use of the app so that we can kind of dispense with paper-based processes.
Yes, that's kind of you, and that's why I asked the question about the transformation, because the quicker we can get onto, you know, the digital side of all this, the better. I don't like running two systems side by side, especially, you know, a manual system. A lot of issues can go wrong there with wrong entries and all sorts of problems. So that's what I was concerned about. But I hear what you say, Councillor Mountain.
You have a second question.
Oh, sorry, but sorry, apologies.
Thank you, Chair. If I'm a member of the public sitting home in Sutton watching the audit and governance for some reason tonight, I would look at what's been said about the P cards, and I think I would come to two conclusions. I would come to a conclusion, which is either there's an issue, fundamental issue with the training, or there's a fundamental issue with the culture around P cards. And I would just like to get the officer's view: is the issue with the training, or is the issue with the culture? Because both, I think, need addressing going forward.
Christine.
I would say the training has had a major impact because it has reminded everyone exactly what the authorisation is for in terms of what their P card can be used for. It's reminding them about what call-off contracts already exist that they can make use of, plus helping us identify any new ones that need to go through a procurement process. So I think that has had a significant impact. Also, the review of all of the limits, etc., to make sure they are appropriate and more robust processes in place for sign-off. I think they've all assisted in transitioning us from where we were to where we are now.
Councillor Mountain.
Thank you very much, Chair. Going to the questions that have already been put forward, I have noticed that somebody's asked how much VAT we've lost. I appreciate that a full review of the VAT has been undertaken. Ultimately, this is public money. On the VAT reclaim, can anybody put a figure to how much we have lost from non-submitted receipts? And moving forward, receipts that haven't been submitted, what is the current policy if the user doesn't submit?
Sometimes with VAT, it can be a little tricky because sometimes the receipts aren't clear or the person doesn't know regarding what the VAT treatment is when it's out of scope and things like that. So in terms of the new system, we're pretty confident the VAT will be reclaimed because it will force the receipt to be produced effectively. And if one isn't produced, why not, etc. So then it goes into management escalation. So in terms of that process, the robust arrangements are in place. Looking back, a review has been undertaken. If those receipts are available, that VAT can be reclaimed and has been reclaimed. So I can't put a figure on it because somebody have to sit and add them all up, which wouldn't be an effective use of officer time other than to give you assurance that we've undertaken that review.
I think going forward, if all the systems and checks and balances are in place, we shall not lose no VAT. Simple as that. Are there any other questions from the committee? One more, and then we're going to move on.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's amazing, you know, because 55 cards at certain times they've been given randomly to people. I may not say probably randomly, but they were given to people in a free way. Because how many departments have we got? And how many head of departments have we got? And how many people under them have we got? This is my question, because if we have 55 departments, or we have If you can answer that question, please, Chris.
So none of the PCARs all of the PCARs would have been given with guidance associated with it, and the officers would have still signed that off. The issue was not the lack of process. The issue was the implementation of process. That was the issue. In terms of the number of services we have, some services, you may have quite a number in a service having access to a PCAR because they individually need to do so. For example, homelessness and housing are particular areas. So you'll see a high concentration in certain community-based services for those types of PCARs. We can give you the analysis of how many are per service area because we have all of that information.
You can go back very quickly because I want to get this moved on. Go
It's
on.
very quick. Sorry, Christine, thank you. The other question, which is I have, is why we have never seen it on the budget, the amount spent on the P cards.
Because it's all in existing budgets. So the budget they're spending already exists. Some of it will be off contracts, some will be from procurement through orders, other spend might be through a P card.
Thank you. I'm going to take two more questions, one from Joe and one from Councillor Woodliff down the bottom there, and then we're going to move on.
Just very quickly, I note in the responses that there was no risk ever highlighted in an operational risk register relating to the use of P cards or misuse of P cards, but there was a general risk, financial risk, and it's just, again, for lessons learned. I've generally found that if you have a general risk that's supposed to catch everything, at operational level, you need to unpack it and it needs to be specific to a process so that it can be managed. And that's just, again, another lesson going forward, is just to make sure that our risks are unpacked rather than all caught up in a general risk at operational day-to-day level. Thank you.
Any feedback back, or are you okay with that?
We have operational risk registers as well as strategic ones.
Sorry, I think the question that was answered was about operational and it said no, so that was why I raised it. But yes, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Woodliff, you have to take the seat, the hot seat, and the microphone is all yours. And can we just get to the point? No preamble and waffling.
If I get the microphone to stand up, yeah, there's no problem. I just wondered, is this a legacy issue? Are we looking at issues which are pre-partnership or rather than post-partnership? How much of what's gone on is really a legacy issue from a past era? That's the question.
Thank you, Christine.
I'd certainly say COVID is in the mix in terms of practices changing. Things started needing to be delivered to home, for example, which isn't allowed under the new procedures. So there's things that have affected our working practices. The new full review and the processes that are in place make that irrelevant almost, because all the checks and balances are there.
Happy?
Get the microphone to stand up, yes.
You're a very happy councillor.
Thank you.
Have a seat. Thank you. Right, before we move on, any more comments from officers around the room before we listen to the management response, which I've read about 3,000 times and it's really embedded in my brain? Does anybody on any of the officers want to say anything? Because now's the time to say it, because I've invited you here to listen to what we've got to say. And I think in turn, I'm quite happy for you to have your say now and talk to us as a committee about anything you want us to raise and be aware of. Here's the chance. That's a very resounding yes. Everybody's happy that they've all got everything sorted out. I really am happy. That gives me that real assurance that the things are right. So now I want you to go through the management response, which I got a very copy the next day. I invited all the officers to do a little quick thing, pop from my email. I thought, my God, this is good stuff. A response to my invitation. Right, who's going to do the response for me?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think, first of all, thank you to the committee for inviting us here this evening. It's not very often we have the opportunity to attend ANG, and I think it just shows the importance of the topic tonight that's been on the agenda, and I think it's fair to say lessons have been learned as a result of it, and I can confirm that all the actions that are set out by our colleagues at Internal Audit have now been fully implemented, so we can confirm that everything we were asked to do has now been done to tighten up our processes and give us the assurance that I think you desire here this evening, and I think the organisation deserves. So lots of work's been done in that space already. It's quite uncommon to provide a management response with an audit, but we felt because of the seriousness of the issue, it did deserve one this evening. So what we have tried to do is pull out in that response how the issue came about insofar as the piece of work that PSPS have been doing to transition Boston onto the new system. It talks about the training that's taken place, and it also talks about the work that we've done across the organisation over the past 2 to 3 months to seek assurance on previous transactions as well. And through that process, talking to assistant directors and talking to other budget managers across the authority, I don't believe we've found any transactions which haven't been appropriate or fraudulent in the swathe of thousands and thousands that we've been through. So I think that gives us some assurance that our workforce, whilst they might not have been fully following a process that we would all desire, there is no fraud in there that we can detect, which I think is really helpful, having done that check and been able to seek that assurance. So going forward, we do now have the app in place. I used it for the first time today, and I can confirm that it does work. You can upload your receipts, and hopefully the assurance that gives us the ability to upload immediately and not lose receipts will make the processes more robust for us. I wasn't going to say anything else, Mr. Chairman, other than just thank you for the opportunity this evening.
That's very kind of you, James. I think you can understand that we have a very strong committee here on A&G, and we obviously are very concerned, and we obviously ask all the right questions. And I think it's important, and I really do appreciate yourself and all the officers coming here tonight to be here, to drag you out on a Monday night when you could be watching Coronation Street, to be here tonight and go through all this with us, because a lesson has been learned, and it is learned, and we've moved from the report now to your response. And I'm pleased you're giving me and the committee the assurance that things are now really, are under control. And I hope that we don't have to see another report like this again in the forthcoming future. What I'm going to suggest to the committee now is, with the committee approval, I'd like to ask the auditor to do another internal audit on P cards in 6 months' time, but more detail. Can I ask the committee, are you happy to support me on that?
Personally, I think we need to understand how that sits in the context of the other internal audit priorities and whether or not there's scope to do that. So
I'll have a...
Yeah, we just can't fit that in, Chair, sorry.
Fair enough.
So it's our standard process that we will follow up any no or limited audit reports. And I think we could do that possibly fairly quickly. So if the actions have all been implemented, we can come in and look at that and bring that report back to committee and kind of complete that journey and give you our independent assessment of what it is now. So we would always follow up and report back to you no and limited assurance audits.
Fair enough. That's kind of, I'm happy with that. Councillor Gleeson, do you want to? You're happy with that? Yeah. Right. Okay. Right. So we're happy with that then. Are everybody okay with that? What the auditor said? Right. Ladies and gentlemen, officers who want to go home now, thank you very much for being here. I do appreciate it, and I'm sorry to drag you out on a Monday night while you should be watching the telly. All right. Have a good evening. If you want to stay behind, it's up to you. If you want to go home. Sorry? I don't think so, no. They only came for the P cards. Thank you very much. Have a safe journey home, and thank you for coming along.
Will be done in time. So I think that's actually a credit to everyone involved as well.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much. Right, we'll move on then now to the next item. I believe it is the payroll, is it?
Yes, Chair, still audit. So I think from page 69 in the progress report, page 70 and page 71, just give the details of the work we've done. So this was a limited assurance audit that we followed up. Page 70 really gives the details. So we followed it up, but just as we were discussing around P cards, part of our standard process, we checked on the previous recommendations that have been made, and we've just reported what we found in here to you. And again, because it was limited, we've attached the full report. So it's in the progress report as standard and a summary. and also members of the committee can see the full report attached. And I'm not going to go through it in detail because I'll take it as read, but we're happy to take any questions, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthew. Any questions from the Councillor Middleton?
We on? Yep. Just reading through this executive summary, it made me cringe and almost curl up and die of embarrassment if I'd been in a senior management position reading this. Out of 9 points and actions that were laid out last year, 12 months ago in a previous audit, 6 of them haven't had anything done, not implemented. That to me, I mean, we've talked about culture in the previous subject, but this to me says it certainly is culture, and it comes from the very top. And if you're not pushing a let's get it done, can achieve attitude right down through your management to your shop floor lads and lasses, we've got a major culture problem, and I think we have. So in our next audits, I don't know how we pick culture up. Is there a measurement that we can do on culture, etc., etc.?
There is work you can do around governance and culture and ethics. Yes.
I think it's something we desperately need. Thank you, Chairman.
Can you make a note of that point, both for the minutes and also Matthew's make a note as well? Questions? Councillor Gilbert.
Yeah, thank you. I struggle to completely understand this particular issue, if I'm honest. I'm not an accountant by trade and I don't particularly like numbers, but I just wonder whether or not these errors are administrative in terms of the impact of them, or whether they actually affect people in any meaningful way, and any issues are likely to come back on staff at some point as a result of the errors that have been identified.
Sam.
So just to clarify, the audit was regarding the payroll control account reconciliation process. So this is the monthly payroll. So the output, if you like, really from the payroll file is then interfaced into the general ledger to ensure that those pay components are reflected accurately in the general ledger. So when we're talking about the coding matters, so the individuals are paid as per their salary, and then we interface that information into the general ledger data. So sometimes the output from the HR system Cypher doesn't align itself to the coding structure within a unit for the general ledger system. So we have to set up new codes to match those pay components, whether it be for attachment of earnings, deductions, or anything like that. So that's the reason why there's some coding matters where the interface isn't automatic from the HR system, the payroll system, to the finance ledger, and that's where there's sometimes manual intervention required.
It doesn't affect any individuals in terms of things like national insurance contribution payments or deductions from earnings for child maintenance or whatever. Okay, thank you.
Hey, Councillor Cantwell.
Just quickly following on from that, it occurs to me that we get the quarterly risk reports, but I can't. There is an ICT section on it, but there's no section on those risk reports in regards to the compatibility of systems, where we have to do some things manually and we have to do some things automatically, because that's not something I've been particularly aware of on previous risk reports. And perhaps I think Joe's touched on it as well. That does need a bit more highlighting in future, because both of these issues have at some point in them manual processes. So you know that is part of these two massive risks which have appeared.
So just to clarify, it's not regarding compatibility of the systems, it is the mapping of the pay elements to the general ledger coding. That's what we're talking about here. So the payroll file will be a value which then needs to be interfaced into the general ledger. If there is a new pay element set up that month that the general ledger hadn't anticipated, that is sometimes why there's then a step needs to put in place to map that pay element to a general ledger code. That general ledger code is probably in existence, it just hasn't been mapped at that point because that pay element hasn't occurred previously.
Do you want to come back, or are you happy with that?
I mean, the only thing it occurs to me is going forward, I think, you know, these risks need to be highlighted more. because this is a risk fundamentally. And in my view, it is, although it has operational elements to it, it's certainly a strategic risk if it's going to be affecting such a fundamental part of what this council needs to do.
Thank you, Christine.
I've asked for a report monthly on the status of all of these, so we can fully understand whether or not we've got any areas to review or discuss.
Thank you. I'm just going to ask on page 71, there's about 3 paragraphs on there where I've got why, and why on mine. And it talks about that we found the overall several key management actions arising from the previous audit review have not been implemented. And it talks about remain exposed to error and lack of timely payroll reconciliation. It talks about not having enough staff. I mean, that doesn't give me any assurance that things are being done properly or in a timely manner. So what is the issue there?
If I can, Chair, to clarify the timeline, I appreciate the report does refer to the audit being taking place in 2022, but the final audit for the payroll control account reconciliation wasn't signed off until July 2023. So I know obviously we talked earlier about being 12, 18 months ago, and I believe that report was then presented to this committee in October last year. So the time frame is actually quite limited. There has been some resource challenges, which has been widely discussed regarding the finance team within PSPS. But I am aware that as of the end of January, the pay control account reconciliations are up to date. That is the current state of play.
That's very kind of you, and I do feel a lot more better when you said all that now. Thank you very much, because it does worry me. And I know we're always looking backwards on these things, but I need to understand the issues and how we arrived at getting the thing rectified and sorted. Councillor Gleeson.
Thank you, Chair. Taking up the points Councillor Middleton raised, I think the way forward on this maybe is for us as a committee to ask the senior management team to look in the future audits at looking at culture. I don't think it's necessarily our role at this stage to say you've got to do it, but I think at this stage our role is to, as a committee, say we have some concerns about these 2 reports we've had, and we have concerns that could be indicating a cultural issue within the council. And as there are audit arrangements that can be looking at those, that we recommend that in the coming year, part of the audit looks at that, or the next time we set up a set of audits.
I'll ask Lewis to come on that one, and he wants to have a quick word on that one. Lewis.
Yeah, Chair, thank you. I think, first of all, it's really important to be clear that in relation to the responsibility for a payroll account reconciliation, that sits firmly with PSPS. It's a finance administration task that we ultimately undertake. So unlike the P cards, which is about council officers spending money and then there being the reconciliation, this is an admin task that sits firmly with PSPS. I'd like to reassure Councillor Middleton that there's no cultural issue. This is a very small amount of people in a finance team who have an administration task to do, which is about technically reconciling the pay and the payroll that has been given to employees and then matching it to budgets across 4 entities. And I think that's equally important because the size of the finance team and the resource capacity, the team have had to make some very difficult decisions during the year around what the priorities are for the finance team. So if you look at payroll accuracy audits, they're very high. So you're paying the right amount to people, on a month-by-month basis, and that's a really important part of the payroll process. This is the next part. This is not about the matters that the other councillor raised about deductions and child maintenance and those things. So this is very much one for me and my team to ensure under Sam's supervision that we get right. There's obviously been a period of work where the team have caught up, and now having caught up, that is a much more manageable process to look at it on a monthly basis, and I will make sure that happens as well.
I just want to say there, Lewis, that if we get any more of these reports, both Christine and yourself, it'd be nice to have an update given to us prior to the meeting, because we're always reading backwards than we're reading in the past, and then we have to come and listen to what the updates are. So today we had that management response to the P cards, which gave us the updated information from all the stuff that we read in the report. It would be a good idea going forward, both from yourself and Christine, if in future we have any reports like this from the internal auditor, that we have an update of where we stand. Because you know, you read all this stuff, and I know we're reading back into time, but at the end of the day, we're getting the wrong impression. And it's only when you come to the meeting on the night, you find out what the true factor is about where we stand. So can in future the committee have not only the internal auditor's report, but some response to that so we know what's going off and what's happening?
Yeah, of course.
Happy?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Right, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, having run large payrolls, I can absolutely echo that this sounds to me like a resourcing issue, and that is what I would certainly put it down to. I suppose on that side, just a question, is the team now, I know you've got a person in place from September leading the team, but is the team now fully resourced, or are we going to still be prioritising one with another?
So as of last week, the team were, with the exception of one post across, again, bearing in mind we've got 5 financial entities, if you include the council subsidiary companies that we also provide a finance service to, most of the roles were recruited to. The councils have recently, through the budget setting process, agreed some additional posts, recognising where we've had to bring in temporary resource for the last 18 months. So we are just about to start the process for that. So there are an additional 4 posts that we will now start the process to. I think the other thing that, and we've seen with some of this, is where we have staff turnover, which naturally happens. Some of the tasks, we've seen some of this work, for instance, move, and obviously sometimes the people leave before the new post holder is in place. So we've equally started to put in those processes where these tasks that occasionally become out of date are actually handed over from one person to the manager to make sure that they're improved going forwards.
And then sort of leading on from that, I think you made it very clear that this is a process that sits fairly and squarely in PSPS. So I think for us as a committee, that's kind of twofold. It's what happens in PSPS and then also what happens in the council. And in this regard, because the process sits squarely in your court, I think we probably have a responsibility to be just checking that from the council's perspective, the levers that it does have in place relating to performance or any other issue relating to PSPS, that the council is exerting those levers correctly, whether that's either as a customer in terms of through the SLA and monitoring performance and through your meetings, and then also I would imagine through stakeholder arrangements, what have you. So I think, you know, from a council perspective, are we happy that in terms of what's happening with payroll, we're content that the performance is being managed in a way that we're happy with?
I think it is now. I think we need to look at enhanced reporting processes so that we know when things are perhaps not being picked up as regularly as they ought to be, so we can work with PSPS to understand what those challenges are.
Yeah, and that's the important bit with. Thank you.
Any more? Yes.
Just comment. I mean, follow up to what you have said, Mr. Chairman. It seems that we are looking at the things at the past, and when we question them here, then we have action given to us. So we are not, you know, we look like, I'm sorry, we look like a bunch of idiots standing here and listening to that. And I think, as the chairman said, we need to have things in place, and we need to know what action has been taken to even towards individuals who probably didn't do the job correctly. Because if I may recall, a while ago, I think 2 or 3 years ago, Matt, I think you stated that you found some faults in our, you know, audits, internal audits. And then I said, if it happens to me, I may get sacked. I remember my words. And you say, no, they were likely, we correct them and these and things. So we are always talking about the things in the past, and it has been corrected or something has been done. And then we cannot rectify, we're just talking about it all the time. And I think we need to be ahead as well and to see what's going on, because I think it's very important for us to follow up that. Thank you.
Matthew.
I think, yeah, I appreciate all those comments. I think an audit is always at a moment in time. And when we go in and do that audit, we report our findings. And obviously part of this committee is to see what we reported, but then you're gaining that assurance of where are we now and improve, because the whole remit of the committee is about improvement and moving forward. So there'll always be an element of, at a moment in time, we did the audit. And there are things like the chairman has suggested, more management response reports, which give a better oversight to you in the pack. But I think the nature of what we do is, at a moment in time, this is what we found. let's gain some assurance about where we are now.
Thank you, Matthew. But the other thing is we don't always know how big the changes have been implemented from when you did the audit X months ago to today. And that's the issue that we have to try and work out by reading these things. And then when we find out on the night, it's, you know, we're asking questions about months ago, when really, if we've got something in front of us that tells us that's what happened months ago in the report, and by the way, this is the management response, or this is what we've done to improve things and change things for the better, then we're in a better position to ask the right questions. Jo.
Chair, thank you. It's not unusual to have at a board meeting or an audit committee meeting to have the internal audit report and then have immediately on the back of that the response from management, so that you then know, well, actually that's answered my 3 questions. And that is not an unusual format. Very similar to what we've done, but perhaps not quite in the order.
No, I agree entirely. That's what I'm been used to in the past. Councillor Gleeson.
Thank you, Chair. Is it normal to have the follow-up audits so quickly after we're aware of the issues that need to be corrected?
I think what we do is, so we just try and fit the work into the annual plan. We would always look at, so when the original audit was done, there'll be a date that the recommendations should be implemented. So as long as that date has passed, we would then do the follow-up. What we wouldn't do is a follow-up while the actions are still outstanding.
I know, sorry, you want to go back on that, Councillor Gleeson? Okay. Okay.
It appeared from one of the earlier answers, there wasn't a great deal of time between us becoming aware of the changes that need to be implemented and it being checked up on. But if that's the case.
Just out of curiosity, Matthew, we're doing the follow-up, which I understand, but how long is it in the work cycle before we have another internal P audit sort of done in more thoroughness? When is the next one due? Is it 4 years down the line?
No. So where there is a no or limited assurance opinion, we would, I guess, around 9 to 12 months, we would follow that up. But if the actions are all quite an early date and they've been done, we can come in and do that quicker.
Lovely.
But it won't be 4 years.
Well, I won't be here then anyway, so that's kind of you. Councillor Mountain.
Thank you very much, Chair. I really want to touch on what Councillor Middleton said, and I can sort of see it from both sides of the table, really. I would like to see some sort of culture markers within the reports. And the reason I say that is I've done sort of bookkeeping before, albeit quite primitive to compare to this sort of accountability. So I sort of understand the reasons why, you know, you'd focus on the key aspects as opposed to sort of some back office areas of the bookkeeping side of it. But as obviously you stated, Lewis, with staffing issues, it sort of brings into context of me sat here at this table now when I read this report of what was going on at the time. You know, if your staff are understaffed because of sickness or because you've got gaps, because there's stress workloads that are going on, maybe you're behind on certain pieces of work and tasks through no fault of your own because you've had an uplift in taskings. Quite rightly, yes, you should focus on the key things, which would be dedicated payroll as opposed to, you know, reconciliation. And I sort of agree with that, but it's trying to put the context in motion of why has this happened as opposed to not because people aren't doing their jobs, but, you know, that metric might be a good in the other way of actually this demonstrates that the staff are a bit burnt out in some ways and need a bit more help or more staffing.
Are you burning your staff out, Lewis?
I certainly hope not. No, and I think, you know, and I appreciate those comments because we have and providing services to a hugely talented and dedicated workforce, not just in finance, but across all of the teams. So in the same way that Matt's described you know, he had to fit in the work to come back and audit, in the same way that the audit plan and the recommendations landed, Sam needed to factor in the time to not only, there was obviously a catch-up issue, so there was a bit of a backlog issue, but yeah, this was absolutely not anybody sitting there and saying we're not concerned what audit have said and we're not going to do it because we want to go and sit in front of Councillor Pierpoint and be criticised for what we've not done. Absolutely, it was not about that. But it's a lot more manageable when you are doing this monthly. And I'm not going to underestimate the task that the finance team have to do all of the year activities. This is just one very small element around the budget development, the reporting, the treasury. It's a small element and it involves a small amount of resource as well. So we've got to be realistic as to how quickly they can do that work.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Again, Chair, this is sort of what I'm adding to the context of it. Like I say, it is a small element. So whilst this looks big on paper, it is just exactly that. It's a small element.
Yeah, we appreciate the work that PSPS do and also the finance team. And I know it's not easy because, you know, people are working across 3 different boroughs as well. And there's a lot of deadlines to meet and that's, I can understand the situation and we are sympathetic towards all that. Any more questions? No, we're going to move on then now to the internal audit plan. And I'll ask Matthew to talk us through that.
Yep, thank you, Chair. So I think straight to page 96 of your packs. So it's just like to present to committee our annual plan for 24-25. This is, I think, to give some assurance to committee. This is internal audit driven, of course. There's always a slight risk that management might drive the internal audit plan and we lose our independence and objectivity. That's never been the case, and that's not the case with this. So this is our internal audit plan. It's linked to your strategic risks and your corporate plan priorities. I think the coverage is really good. So I'm really happy that by doing this, I'll be able to give a robust annual opinion at the end of the year. It's also flexible. So if things come up during the year that are high risk or need to be looked at, we can flex this plan and we can take things out and add things in. But this is our statement of intent at the beginning of April to deliver this audit plan to you. And I think it picks up things like performance management, the SLAs and PSPS performance management. There's finance budget monitoring in there. There's the transformation. There's general finance control testing. I think the depots and waste has come up as a key strategic risk. And the capital programme and towns fund, of course. Council's been very successful at getting money in. So it's a really good time to come and have a look at how that is progressing and the governance around that. So I'm really happy with the plan, and this is here for the members of the committee to review, and they can see what the coverage is. And really, I'm happy to take any questions on it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the internal plan? I'll start with you, Councillor Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to see that depots have been added to this because I know it's on our strategic risk register. Well, it popped up on our strategic risk register this year. But I'm equally as happy to see ICT on there. And I just had a couple of comments. So where it mentions technology infrastructure failure, is that, in other words, our resistance to hardware outages? And when it says coverage to be announced, when will that be announced?
You'll see it's scheduled for Q4. So during the year, we'll meet up with senior leadership team and ICT management and just look at the risks around ICT and agree the areas to cover. So I think later on in the year, we'll be bringing the scope of that based around risk. And we can update this in our progress report so you can see what those areas will be.
Councillor Gilbert.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy with all of this. Just a question really about the capital programme towns fund. Just how do you evaluate the success of the capital programme, the investment that's come as a result of the monies that have come into the borough from the towns fund? It seems to me very, very hard to quantify, particularly in the current economic scenario, what the impact of this spend is going to be. Because the line on the graph, not only for Boston, I've got contact with 3 other main sort of similar towns, the line on the graph does seem to be going south at the moment economically. And obviously what we want to do is we want to turn Boston's fortunes up. I just wonder how you measure that.
I think what we've set out to do is look at the governance and controls around the way capital programs and towns fund money is being managed. So I think your specific thing, maybe officers might pick up on that kind of success criteria, but we would look at how well is the council managing that? Is it following process? Is there solid governance and risk management around it? So that's the elements we would pick up. I think Christine might want to come in on that.
So I'm just coming on that. So several aspects here. First aspect is normally on budget on time. But in the current contract inflationary environment, that's very difficult because a lot of contracts are coming in excess of perhaps valuations, QS valuations that are a couple of years old when this journey was commenced on. So that's just one element. In terms of outputs and outcomes, when you were given that funding, you're given very specific outcomes and outputs to hit. So it might be new jobs, it might be throughput, footfall, all those sorts of things. So they're things that are already built into the monitoring that DLUC are expecting us to feed back as those projects get underway. So they're already built in and they're already being monitored, and that's part of the regular monitoring that we do to DLUC. So again, in terms of processes, what Matthew's teams will be looking at is, where are we on that in terms of our processes for monitoring that?
Thank you very much. Jo.
Yeah, just picking up on that one first. I would expect in the governance benefit realisation to be a clear part of the governance, and that whatever portfolio board, town deal board, whoever is looking at benefit realisation, so it should touch on that. And yes, it should then be measured elsewhere. I did have one question on the PSPS piece of work, which is looking at the setting and management of SLAs effectively. Is that going to look at both the arrangements for Boston as a customer in terms of managing the performance and what it wants from PSPS, and is it also going to look at it from an owner's perspective in terms of the levers that it has there to determine future performance of PSPS? And sorry, no, you carry on. No, finish. You can answer that first.
Yeah, okay. It's nearly 8 o'clock. Yes, we will agree terms of reference with management on that and pick up the key areas around that. So I think it's a question of looking at where the risks are in the process, what the process is, and absolutely what Boston gets from that and how it judges performance. So I think that there'll be elements that we'll agree with management as part of our initiation in terms of reference. And what we'll focus on is that the key risks, process and governance, and making sure those things are in place.
Right, and that presumably will highlight where responsibilities have transferred and then what risk, because risk goes two ways, and risks that services from PSPS might pose to Boston Borough Council. Because one of the things I'm very conscious of is that there is no, functions have transferred in whole with no, if you like, intelligent client necessarily for all of the corporate services. So for example, in the case of HR, they're providing your advice in terms of what you want from HR as well as the service for HR. So I'm assuming it will pick up those sorts of things as well.
Yeah, we'll look into all the detail and just, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, because there are some concerns, I think, in terms of the model.
Right, no more questions. So we're going to move on to the next item. Thank you very much, everybody. We're going to item 3 now. This is the risk management report. I'm going to ask John, is it John? Suzanne, beg your pardon. Oh, Suzanne, I do apologise. I didn't see you hiding down there. Carry on, all yours.
Thank you, Chairman. So this is the usual Q3 strategic risk report. This is as at the end of December 2023. The table at 2.2 on page 102 in the covering report shows you the current risk scores, any changes in Q3 and the direction of travel. The full details are set out in the appendix. There's one new risk for me to highlight to you, and that relates to the net zero target, and you'll see that in the report. The most important thing that I wanted to raise with you today and to explain are the risk workshops that are being held at the moment. So we're working with the assistant directors to review all of their strategic, operational, partnership and fraud risks for Q4 reporting. So as Matthew mentioned at the beginning, the fraud risk work that the internal audit have done will feed into those risk workshops and feed into your Q4 report. That will be at the end of March 2024. And then we'll come forward to your next meeting. It will pick up all the suggestions that we've had, suggestions for improvement from the committee, and particularly Joe met with Councillor Dorian, and we have a lot of suggestions for improvement we've picked up from there. In particular, we're looking at the wording to make sure that the risks really are risks, to add in those dates that we've talked about and some specific actions in there. So we're reviewing all of that. There's also the operational risks that we've talked about today around P-card. So we'll be able to raise that with the individual ADs to say, are there other processes that they're aware of, having looked at the P-card audit, other things that we need to look at, the governance issues that you've talked about today, culture and ethics. We can use all of that as a prompt in those risk workshops to make sure that we're looking at that in the whole, and manual processing you've mentioned as well today, and making sure that that's in the operational risks. The other area that I just wanted to mention as well, which you'll have seen in the audit report, is inherent risk. So it was suggested in the audit that we ought to consider including inherent risk in our register, and there are pros and cons to that. So we are talking to the ADs at these risk workshops to see what works best. And we talked with the auditors about it as well. There are pros and cons to it. Sometimes if you show the inherent risk, it gives a better view overall. Inherent risk is if you did nothing at all, what would the risk be? And then we put in the controls and we have the current risk, and then we put in the controls we are aiming to do, and that's our target risk. It shows a journey and I like it. But it also can be confusing. So some managers and owners of the risks can find it difficult to score a kind of hypothetical risk if you had no mitigation in place. So it's a very good recommendation, and it's really starting some good conversations, but we haven't come to a decision yet about whether that should be in or not. And I'll be able to bring you the pros and cons to your next report so that we can make a decision at that point. So those were the areas I just wanted to raise with you. I hope I haven't caused confusion. That was not a... Yeah.
Shall we take some questions? Joe.
First of all, thank you. I very much like the new format of the risk register because you don't have to dot between tables in the report, so that's very helpful. I imagine it's also more helpful for managers trying to manage risk on a daily basis. Very much welcome the work that you've got planned, as you described, because yes, these do need some tightening up in terms of words, in terms of dates, and also the fact that for many of them, the current score and the target score appear to be the same, even though you've got planned actions in place and you say they need treating. So I think they need to look very closely at the scores. The one benefit of inherent, some people use it, some people don't. The one benefit of inherent is it does give you some confidence that the mitigation factors, the existing controls you've got in place are working if it's changing the scores. If you're inherent and your current are the same and you're doing stuff, well, stop doing it because you're wasting your time. So that is the one benefit, is it does help you that journey. This is what the risk would be. We're doing this stuff, it's now here, still not where we want it to be, this other stuff we're doing, and that'll take us to our target. And then they should all migrate down the way. But yes, some organisations use it, some don't. But very much welcome the work that you're doing and look forward to seeing the updated risk register with the tighter actions, dates and everything else.
Thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Cantwell.
Just a quick one for me. After the last meeting, with regards to the depots began as an operational risk. And I think I asked after the meeting whether high or critical operational risks could be included in some sort of table, so the committee are aware. Is that still planning to go ahead at next year's reporting?
Yes, that's been picked up in the Q4 review, because the process that we agreed in the framework is that ADs will look at all of their high operational risks. So we'll be able to bring you that in the Q4.
Thank you.
Councillor Gilbert.
Whether this question is relevant, I hope it is. But we've seen a number of businesses close in Boston, and we've also, I think, got a couple of the banks who have indicated that they might not remain in the town for any significant length of time. As a council, we were sort of taken by surprise with the decision of Barclays to pull out of the town. I just wonder whether, in terms of local economy, there's a need to add something in about large businesses and large employers deciding that they're going to leave Boston, because I think it's likely that trend is going to increase over time, and it has a devastating effect, on the town centre and our local economy. The closure of the banks seems to me to be self-defeating, because obviously the banks have got mortgages and loans with these companies, and they're leaving the town.
Can I just stop you there? I don't really think that's a relevant question to do with the council's risk management. I understand it's a risk as a borough and as a economy.
Yeah, I just wonder whether we can sort of do something to sort of in a sense anticipate the decision of some of these commercial.
Yeah, okay.
I'll pick that up, yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll pick it up with the AD for the relevant area.
Okay, if you're happy with that.
Local economy is in the risk register.
Apologies there, Councillor Gilbert. I thought we were going off track a little bit. I wanted to drag you back in, but I was going to get my fishing rod out and wheel you in, but we've all sorted that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to come back to the local economy and precisely on the Boston market. We put as medium. And I think on the last budget, it was, I think, the income out of the market for 23-24 was £860,000. And I can assure you it's not more than 50 stalls probably on Wednesday or less. And Saturday is even lesser than that. So if we take £25 as average, we're not taking probably in a year even £150,000 out of that. Wouldn't it be a high risk instead of having it as medium risk?
Thank you. We did pick that up with the lead, and we've put some more detail in there about the work that's happening around the market and the town centre actions that are all going on at the moment. But I will pick that up again at the next workshop. Thank you.
Can I come back, Mr. Chairman? Yes. If you can, Susan, bring us even, how many stalls we get and how much money we get on Wednesday and Saturday, then it will give us probably a clear picture of what's going on in the marketplace, because I don't believe it's £860,000 we take a year from that. Thank you.
Any more questions on that one? Thank you very much, Suzanne. That was very thorough and detailed as usual. We now go on to the next item, which is the Treasury Management Update. I'll ask Sean then to present item 4. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you have before you at page 115 the overarching report, which is the Q3 Treasury Management Update, and the appendix, which provides all the detail, is provided at page 124, and it's page 124 that I propose to go to. This is for the quarter ending the 31st of December, Q3. Paragraph 2 on page 124 provides a detailed economic update, which has been provided by Link Group, our external Treasury advisors. That sets quite a lot of information as to what's been going on in the global economies in the UK and worldwide. But the key points there are that there's been a decline in real gross domestic product in October. There's been consumer price index inflation continuing on its downward trend, and that's now gone from 8.7% in April down to 3.9% in November. And the bank, probably the final point, which has one of the major effects on the council, is the Bank of England has held its interest rate at 5.25 since its meeting on the 3rd of August. So there's been no changes since that time. Paragraph 3 refers to the Link Group's interest rate forecasts, and you'll see from those tables on page 128 and 129 that those forecasts have changed quite a bit during the year. The latest forecast, which was made on the 7th of November, as the first reduction in the base rate for quarter ending September 2024. So they're expecting interest rates to remain at the current levels. So obviously that will enable the council to earn reasonably large amounts of investment income until such time as those rates start to fall. And we have been locking in investments at these higher rates in anticipation of the rates starting to fall. Paragraph 4 on page 131 refers to the council's annual investment strategy, which was approved by council on the 6th of March 2023. That sets the council's priorities as initially the security of the capital, followed by liquidity, and then finally yield in that order. The investment performance for the year to date, as at the 31st of December, on page 132, you'll see from the graph there that shows the level of interest rates in the market. And at the start of this financial year, you saw those rates started to rise to around 5.56%. But over the second half of the calendar year, that has certainly started to gradually reduce. And the anticipation is that that will continue to gradually reduce until such time as the first base rate change comes through. The table on page 133 shows detailed breakdown of the investments that the council held at the 31st of December, totaling £27.99 million. And also that table provides a breakdown of the start dates and end dates of the maturities, the rates that those investments are invested at, and the individual amounts of those investments. Table on 134 provides detail of the purchase cost of your property fund investments. That is the standard table and there's providing no change with the exception of the M&G investment figures, which are reducing as and when investment payments are being returned. The landscape table on page 135 provides an update of the valuations of those property fund investments at the 31st of December 2023. So based on your purchase cost, the left-hand column of £17.7 million, you've been getting an average yield on those investments ranging between 3.1% and 4.6%, depending on which fund manager you refer to. Net asset values of those funds, that's the current value of those funds, at the 31st of December was £15.5 million, which is a reduction of £2.2 million from the original purchase cost, and a reduction in the current year of just over £700,000. That is due to the current cycle in property fund valuations. The expectation is that those valuations are nearing their lows before interest rates start to fall, and then those valuations are anticipated to start to increase. On page 136, the table at the top of that refers to the returns that you received since the purchase of those property funds. So in previous years, you received a net return of £3,342,000. The budget for the first 3 quarters for the current year was £484,000, and the estimated dividend that we've received in the first 3 quarters was £533,000, so approximately £50,000 ahead of the budget. And that makes therefore your total net revenue distribution since purchasing the property funds of just under £3.9 million. As you'll be aware, the M&G property fund is being liquidated, and the asset values, the assets within that fund are being sold, and therefore the funds being returned to the council. At the 31st of December, the council had received just under £3.3 million from sale proceeds. And since this report was produced, the council has received another £392,000 at the end of January. The bottom table on page 136 provides a breakdown of your maturity structure of those investments, split between 1 week, 1 month, through to 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and 12 months, and greater than 12 months. And you'll see just under £8 million held short term, and that is to meet day-to-day cash flow requirements and planned capital expenditure payments that are anticipated to be coming through. In relation to the returns for investments, you'll see on the table on top of page 137, if we look at the total net income, as at the profile budget for Q3, net position was expected to be just under 1.1 million, and the actual was just under 1.7 million. And by way of forecast for the annual budget, the annual budget was 1.462 million, and the projected outturn is just over 2.2 million, so well in advance of budget. Treasury investments achieved an average rate of 5.09%, compared with the average 3-month benchmark of 5.1%. So we virtually caught that benchmark up now that the rising interest rates have ceased. Property funds have achieved an average rate of 3.99%, giving a combined overall rate on return of investments of £4.68%, sorry. In relation to borrowing, you'll be aware that the council repaid its £15.449 million of external borrowing with the PWLB on the 9th of October, and in doing so received a discount of just over £6.4 million. Fixed interest costs for 2023-4 on PWLB borrowing has therefore been reduced to £200,099. Page 138, you'll see the table in relation, the chart that shows PWLB rates during the year, and you'll see, similar to the investment rates, those rates increased during the first 3 to 4 months of the financial year until we get to October, where they peaked, and then they've started to fall from that point. So the decision to make your repayments of prematurely repay your borrowing was taken at a very good point in time. Paragraph 7 is a new table, and that's providing a summary of the net position against budget of investment interests, borrowing, and the discount to show an overall position for the council of the treasury activity. So as at Q3, the net position was expected to be 731,000, and the actual equated to just under £1.5 million. So well in excess of the budget. The annual return is expected to be, the budget for 2023-24 was just under 970,000, and the forecast outturn is a net position of £2.2 million, giving overall benefit to revenue of £1.237 million above budget. On the 31st of December, it can be seen from that table that the forecast position is, as I've stated, 1,237,000 above budget, and this compares to the position at the 30th of September, where that was 868,000. So we have increased by around £400,000. Paragraph 8 refers to compliance with Treasury prudential indicators. I can confirm that the council has complied with prudential indicators, and in relation to investments, we have adhered to the council's approved counterparty criteria, and we haven't breached any counterparty limits. Page 140 provides updated values for your Treasury indicators and prudential indicators as at the 31st of December. And on page 141 and 142, that provides a up-to-date position in relation to capital programme and the Q3 forecast outturn for capital expenditure. And the pay table on 142 provides the funding of that capital expenditure. The recommendation is that Audit and Governance is recommended that members of the Audit and Governance Committee receive and review the contents of this report attached to Appendix A. That concludes my report, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them. Thank you.
I've got to say, Sean, that was very concise, very informative, very helpful. I want to give you my money to look after my money, and you make sure you get me a return that you just got returned for the council, because I'll tell you what, you're a genius. Mr. Moneypenny, thank you very much. Right, any questions for Sean? Councillor Gleeson.
Thank you. And not particularly a question. It's just I always like this report because I can understand it. I just thought I'd mention that in passing. It makes good reading as well, obviously, and yeah. But no, it is one of the few reports here that, to my mind, is written clearly. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Joe.
Yeah, and I think, again, thanks for the agility in terms of the repayment of the borrowing, because that's become very clear now that we've seen that tail off in the rates. It's very clear that we made that decision at the right time. So or rather, you made the decision at the right time between you. Thank you. Just one question, which it comes from this. It might not be a question for you though, and that is that just doing some payroll reconciliation. We've got a couple of things in this report that perhaps need to be reflected in the risk report. So One of them is the slippage in the capital programmes. I know that we've got that in the risk report. I'm not sure that it's reflected to the extent of the slippage that we're seeing in the expenditure. That must be having a significant impact on our benefit realisation from those big capital programmes. So that perhaps needs to be updated in the risk register. Not for you, but if you can take that, if someone can take that back. And then the second one is the risks highlighted from, well, we haven't got to it yet, the audit report, whether they're reflected. I'll say it now. There are some risks that are highlighted in the audit report. It would be nice to just be reassured that those are reflected in our operational or strategic risk register as well. Thank you.
Do you want to come back on the first question that Joe, Christine?
So in terms of the slippage, whilst to be honest, it's not that unusual with projects of that size and scale, and the actual deadline by which we have to commit the spend, whilst it is slippage for the capital programme, we're well within our timelines for delivery of those projects. So again, we were perhaps, I would suggest, a little optimistic in terms of when we thought we would be delivering. So we haven't got any breaches or anything like that. It's more about planning them out and having, if you like, some of the detail completely work through in terms of the programme of delivery for the town's funding in particular. So it's that and the LUF that have caused the majority of the slippage within the capital programme. Within the quarterly report that goes to Cabinet, there's quite a detailed update regarding why we've got that slippage and what's happening with those projects particularly. So even though it's manifesting here as additional income that we can invest and generate that income, Cabinet are managing the capital programme per se. And all I'm saying to you, there's nothing there for the committee to be overly concerned about. But I will feed back to Suzanne to make sure if there is anything that we can suitably reflect it in the risk register.
Thank you. And I'm specifically looking at the benefit.
Yeah.
Are there any more questions for Sean on his report? No? Do we take it that we're all happy with Sean's report and we can note it as okay, accepted and well done? Thank you, Sean, for that one. Very kind of you, as usual. We move on to the next item now, and that's item 5. It's the external audit completion report. Is that the one? Is that the auditors? Mark?
Yes. So the audit completion report sets out the final stages of the 22-23 financial statement audit. If I could take you to page 147 of the pack, that's our executive summary. Fundamentally, we're required to issue two aspects. One is we issue an opinion on whether or not the financial statements present a true and fair view. And in our terrible speak, we say we are anticipating an unmodified, unqualified opinion. It essentially means we're in a place to issue a clean opinion on the financial statements. The second part of our responsibilities is around identifying any and reporting any significant weaknesses in arrangements for financial sustainability, for governance, and for improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness, performance management. That work is ongoing, but we've come to a point where we conclude there are no weaknesses to report at this point. There's some work that needs to be finished on that one, and it stays open until we issue something called our auditor's annual report, something I brought to you last time. We're required to issue that report within 3 months of signing our opinion of the financial statements. I'm hoping to sign the opinion on the financial statements in the next week or so. I certainly believe the report should be here. I think your next committee is in the 20th of May, so our report will come to you by then. So it's in train. In terms of status of the audit, obviously when we write these reports, they go out of date almost immediately. So page 149 of your pack sets out the 4 areas that were outstanding when we issued our report to you. The first 3 areas, cash flow statement, cash and cash equivalents and pensions, all of that work is now complete and there are no matters to bring to your attention. The last one around continuous quality control procedures is mainly administrative. And essentially it stays open until the date on which I sign the opinion, and that's just receiving the accounts. So I don't anticipate any issues there. Section 3, I will broadly skip over, other than to say our approach has been issued in line with our plans. We've not had to change any approach, and that's the key thing. No new risks arising. Section 4 goes through the significant findings. The main areas of our work were centred around 3 aspects. One called the management override controls, and that's testing focused around journals, ledger entries, and key estimates in the financial statements. The second area looks at the valuation of the pension liability, big numbers, lots of judgments, actuarial assumptions. The third area looks at the valuation of land and buildings, big numbers, judgments and estimates. All of that work has been completed. There's no significant matters arising. As part of this year's audit, there were 2 other areas that we did look at. We didn't call them significant, but we did dip into them. One was making sure that the issues that came out of the group accounts consolidation in the previous year had been washed through. That work was complete with no significant issues. The second area, there was a new financial ledger that was implemented during the year. So again, we performed some testing around that to make sure that we could rely on the outputs of that. There's one small recommendation arising out of that. I wouldn't call it significant in its nature, but it's something that we've brought to your attention. Page 158 of the pack goes into the significant matters. One of which reflects on, obviously, the ledger is a big issue. Sorry, it's a big deal for the council. Putting in a system is hard work. So obviously that was an area that we looked at. The other is around bank reconciliations. So if I take you to section 5 of our report and page 161, we have raised what we call a significant deficiency in control around bank reconciliations. These are fundamental, basic controls that should be in place, and the bank reconciliation was not performed for 11 months. That's been remedied, rectified, and we've managed to complete our work on that. But it is an area that needs to be done on a timely basis.
Can I just stop you there and find out why it took 11 months to get a bank reconciliation? Because I don't think that's acceptable. I'm sorry. Can somebody give me an answer to that? Because I'm just not happy listening to that. 11 months for a bank reconciliation, it's just not on.
The specific details to why it's taken 11 months, I don't know about. I'd have to go back to the team to evaluate that. But what I can assure the committee is, when it was brought to my attention that the bank reconciliations were behind, we have put management controls in place to ensure they are up to date and they are remedied. Obviously, Christine's already mentioned in relation to the payroll control audit about having that monthly management content about what the status is of all control account reconciliations, not just payroll, all of the key controls, if you like, really for finance. We're also putting in performance clinics for the team as well to ensure that it does not take 11 months going forward for these sorts of matters to come to our attention. The current state of play is there are 5 bank reconciliations for Boston. 4 of those are currently reconciled to the end of January, and February is currently underway. The one of the accounts is reconciled up to about the end of December, because it's the one which has got the most transactions going through. But we are in a stronger position we were when this was obviously brought to Mark's attention a few months ago. So work has, I apologise that it is that far behind, but we have taken proactive action to put it right going forward.
So we're doing it on a monthly basis going forward from now on. Did you question that 11 months at the time, Mark?
I think we did, and it was promised imminently. We've received it. It was something that was outstanding at our interim, so it's taken a long time to come through, and which is why we've escalated it as an area that needs to be resolved. And obviously, officers have taken that now.
Okay, well, I'm pleased that we're on top of it now. We'll move on. Carry on, Mark. Sorry to interject.
No, that's fine. The last piece I'll just take you to, section 6 of the accounts sets out the adjustments and unadjusted items. We always present any matter that we find over what we call a trivial threshold of £32,000. There are 2 items that management have chosen not to adjust on the grounds that they are not material to the financial statements. And those would probably wash out in future years. The second details those that have been adjusted in the financial statements and needed to be adjusted so for us to get to the place where we could conclude. That's it. other than as I always conclude at the end, we always carry out our independence and objectivity tests to make sure that we are in a clean, clear place, and we've completed those. And I can assure you that there are no matters impeding our independence to close out this audit.
Can I just ask the question then, Christine? What is the 2 items on the 32K that's not going to be relevantly significant to affect the accounts? What are those items?
So if I may, one is, so it's on the details on page 166 of the report. So one is in relation to the pensions liability, £148,000. I'm not certain of the detail behind that one. I don't know if you know.
Sorry, it might be easier for me to do it. So the first one is a complete timing difference that will get reversed out next year. So when you prepare your financial statements, you're given an actuarial valuation of how much the pension asset is worth. Come September, when the pension fund auditor finishes that work, we get an outcome of that it may have moved, and in which case it may have moved, and I use the word may have moved by £146,000. But as it's not a cash realisable asset.
You know, I've had issues before with pension schemes, Mark, where in the companies I've run, where there's been 300 or 400 employees, and there's obviously a massive pension scheme, how the fluctuation of pensions, and sometimes it shows quite a big deficit, doesn't it? From time to time, and it's just got to keep on top of it. That's the main thing, as far as I'm concerned. Have we got a finger on the pulse on the pensions? That's the thing.
Your pension fund is administered by Lincolnshire County Council, or the LGPS, Local Government Pension Scheme. So it is the information provided by the actuary. So as Mark's mentioned, we will close Boston's account, so Boston's share of the pension liability based on the information we have from the actuary at a set date and time. If the auditors or the audit of those accounts are then different from what we've had, that's where the timing difference is coming through based on what we've used, the information we've used to close the accounts versus the completion of the pension audit. In relation to the second item, just to clarify, this is a what if scenario, if you like, really. So in relation to this, the actual value of the item is £12,000. It's in relation to a lease for a rental property where the rental is due on the 27th of March. So on the 27th of March, and it's for a 3-month period, we have raised the invoice for that 3-month period, but the debtor invoice is recognised in the incorrect financial year, if you like, really. So we have had a robust discussion, I think it's fair to say, with Mark and his team about the treatment of it. So it is it's a presentation matter rather than a misstatement. So that's what happens in this situation is the auditors say, if this event was to occur, if it was to be manifested in other areas, this is what the likely value could be, which is why it hasn't been adjusted.
I understand that. That's good. Thank you very much for that clarification. So, John, you finish your report then? Do you want to take any questions from the committee? Anybody want to raise any questions or any points on the? It was very, very, very thorough and very concise. Thank you very much. Any questions, Christine?
And I thank the auditor for getting this done, because obviously it'll be one probably of not that many that may be completed this year as a result of all the delays. So thank you for getting Boston's done.
Yeah, I'd like to second that. Thank you very much, Mark, you or your team. I know it's been difficult with the sort of process, and also we've been behind, haven't we, over the last few years of some of the issues and councils have faced. But it's nice to know that we're on top of it now anyway. And I thank you and your team and everybody else involved in helping you to get there. Thank you. Right, so we're happy with that. Are we okay for the question?
There too. I know we understand what's happening with the reconciliations going forward, but I think there was a question about why there was the 11-month gap. Are we asking for a response on that?
We've had a response, I think, and I was satisfied, but do you want to come back on that one, Christine?
This will be part of that monthly report I'm asking for, to have an update on any outstanding reconciliations, no matter what the control area.
And are we all noted the auditor's report there, and we're happy with that? So we move that forward and take it as agreed. Okay, we've approval of the financial statement then. Thank you. Right, so we're on to item 6. Item 6, approval of financial statement. Sam, over to you.
So this is linked to the item that Mark has just presented. So now the audit of the 22-23 accounts is substantially complete. We have prepared the accounts and adjusted them for those. Now the audit is complete, and those accounts are presented to committee to, as per the recommendation, approve the financial statements set out in Appendix A, approve the annual governance statement 22-23, and also delegate to the Section 151 officer in consultation with the chairman to approve any amendments if required after the committee date and prior to the official signing of the financial statements. The reason for that recommendation is, as Mark's said in his report, the accounts aren't ready to be signed today. They'll be signed either this week or next week, and that's the reason for that delegation. This obviously also links as well to the training session that we provided last Monday evening for members relating to the 22-23 accounts, but nothing further to add. Happy to take questions.
Any questions for Samantha? So the recommendations are contained in the report on page 183. Do I have a proposer? And do I have a seconder? Councillor Gleeson and Councillor Anton Danny. All those in favour? Anybody against? Any abstentions? Right, motion carried. Thank you. Item 7, financial statement accounting policies on page 293 of the agenda pack. Nicole, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So this report details the accounting policies relating to 2023-24. This is the annual report presented each year to the committee. The recommendation is that the committee review and agree the accounting policies for the inclusion within the financial statements for 23-24. The accounting policies detail the specific principles applied by the council in preparing and presenting the financial statements in accordance with SITFA's Code of Practice on Local Authority Accounting. The policies do not change significantly through the years, and the key principles I'd like to draw your attention to start on page 297. So accruals of income and expenditure. This is where the financial statements are prepared on an accruals basis, meaning transactions are recognised where they occur and not when payment is received or made. That is one of the main principles the financial statements are prepared on. And then on to page 306. Item 13, interest in companies and other entities. This relates to the production of the group accounts from 2021-22 onwards for the inclusion of public sector partnership services, incorporating the council share into the financial statements. As I say, the policies do not change significantly year on year, so I won't go into detail, but that concludes my report. I'm happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for Nicole? Right, the recommendation is the committee review and agree the report. Do I have a proposer and a seconder? Councillor Gleeson, Councillor Anton Danny seconding. All in favour? Any against? No abstentions. Right, moved. Thank you. Item 8. Speak to John now, item 8 on the work programme. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Good evening, committee members. The work programme that is before you is your work programme for this year. This is the last scheduled meeting in this municipal year for this committee. The dates of committee meetings for next year are currently being drafted across the partnership. They will be circulated in advance of your annual meeting, but they are obviously subject to formal confirmation at the annual meeting, which is scheduled on the 20th of May. So as soon as we have those draft dates, Chairman, we will circulate them for committee's information. Thank you.
Right, just couple of more things. We were going to have a training session tonight, but I felt that it was a bit too heavy with all the agenda items. To have a self-assessment training tonight would have blown our minds out, and I think my head would have dropped off. So we've moved that training session to a standalone training session on Monday, the 8th of April. I think you've already been notified of this anyway, and it should be in your diaries. And I can't, is it 6 o'clock or 6:30 it's starting? Can someone just remind me? Anyway, it's on Monday the 8th of April. I'll make sure we get the information sent out. Is it Rebecca James who's organising this? And she's been very good, and I've messed her about a bit by chopping and changing, but we've got there in the end. But it's very important that we have this self-assessment. Bring your computers with you, because you'll need that on the evening anyway. And thank you very much, Councillor Gleeson, 6:30, because we are going to do this self-assessment of our own committee, and it's a training session for us. So that's that one. The other thing is, I'd like to thank all the people here tonight, and you came along from KPMG just to see what's going on. Thank you very much, Rosie. I'd like to thank Christine and her team, Matthew, Mark, I haven't got a Luke and John, Nicole, Sam, Amanda here as well, and everybody else on the committee. We've had a very robust meeting, and it's been very interesting and very, I think I've quite enjoyed it, believe it or not, the actual discussions, the outcomes and the way forward. And I think in future going forward, I'd like to see these sort of update reports when we have these internal reports about where we're at that stage of today, as opposed to reading, 6 months down the line, or what happened 6 months ago. But anyway, thoroughly enjoyed the meeting. Thank you very much for your. Oh, Councillor Gleeson, go on then.
Just one thing, Chair. I think this might be the last time Lazars are here.
Can I thank Lazars? It's your last time. Is it your last time here? Oh, but there you are. I'm sure you're going to go on to other things, and you've got bigger and better things as well to do. Big county councils to sort out, and all the other things that you've got to do. Anyway, but thank you for all the work you've done working with the team here. We do appreciate it. I apologise. I thought you might be coming back here for one more go, but in May, but obviously not. Thank you very much for that. Thank you all for this evening. Have a safe journey home. I'll see you on next Monday. David.
Just a quickie from last time, we identified quite a large settlement figure that was put out. I think we were interested to know, one, how did that number come around? How do these numbers get to that? Because I've never seen anything like it in the private sector. And the other thing was, what sort of risk are we at? I mean, that if you got one of those in your year for whatever reason, so I'd like to know what reasons we might have and what risk there is to us of us having to contain one of those in the account.
This was the question we raised at regarding the departing chief executive of the Borough Council at the time, and there was obviously a large number of payment, and I just think if you can clarify that for the committee, it would be helpful.
I'm still looking into that, Chairman, so I've backtracked through the decision-making process. So I'll circulate the previous reports that were taken to full council as part of that.
Yeah, as long as we've got some information that clarifies what we're asking the question. Yeah, okay. I'll sort that out. Right. Thank you very much, everybody. Safe journey home. See you next Monday for the council meeting. And and John, of course, I forgot to mention John. I do apologise. Thank you very much for coming along. You're sitting down there, John. I can't see you, but you're very quiet all night, and you've done a good job. Well done. Enjoy your safe journey home, everybody. And thank you very much.